Okay. Now I'm here at a Future of Work event, so I decided to show up not with an old crusty PowerPoint, but with a research prototype. And this is about the second time I'm doing this. So I'm a little nervous. We'll see if that comes up. All right, I think we're in business. So, good morning. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time, and I'm not going to do this, don't worry. This is my first time in Melbourne, and I'm about 24 hours in, and it's been amazing. I want to thank Philip for allowing me to be here. I want to thank the whole Worktech crew. It's always a pleasure coming out to your events. And I want to thank the sponsors who've been amazing hosts so far, so really excited to kick off the day and share a little bit what my team is doing at Microsoft. We are an Envisioning team where we think 5 years into the future to look at work scenarios, how the future of work is changing given the drastic shifts that we're all experiencing across business, industry, obviously technology, but also sociocultural trends. So what I'd like to do this morning is share about 15 minutes, some of the research that I'm leading with my team, share some of those thoughts around the changes in the environment. And then I would like to show you a vision video that we just launched a couple days ago. So this is only the second time I have the pleasure of doing this on stage. And spent the remainder of my talk explaining what the heck was going on in that video. Because when you watch it for the first time, it can be a little overwhelming. So if that sounds good, I'm going to go right ahead. And by the way, my team is also, we're a design-led team. We're not just talking about the future, we're actually building a lot of stuff. We build prototype and scenarios. We have an Envisioning center in Redmond. If any of you ever make it out to Seattle, I don't know why you would when you live in Melbourne, but if you are, there's an open invitation to check out the Envisioning center and see maybe with a little bit more depth what it is that we're doing. So before we even start, I think we all need to question what these words mean today. Work is a critical component of people's lives. The Pope says, without work there is no dignity. We are all working on something to be making a contribution, to be part of something, to make a difference. And oftentimes also, just to be honest, to get some stuff done. So we know work is important, but it's changing drastically. The context of work is changing. And this is where I want to kind of look at 3 areas of shifts that we're seeing and explore those a little bit with you. And the first one really is the one where everybody just nods their head. Yeah, I get it, I've seen this. It's about connected devices that are exploding around the world. In the olden days, it was the PC. Then we got these guys. Then tablets, but increasingly in the future it's going to be connected devices in our environment, in our cars, in our homes, and in our offices. And that's what's driving a whole host of data, information, and frankly, it puts a lot of challenges to our lives. So the speed and the volume of information is exploding. And just to show you one little stat, this is 2006. We're looking at the digital universe, if you will, digital content. Last year was 4.4 zettabyte. I had to learn what a zettabyte is. It's a trillion gigabyte. It's a big number. And this is going to grow tenfold by 2020. So what does it mean for us, for people working and companies, when you are just overwhelmed with the amount of information? Try finding this critical bit of information, or even knowing that it exists. So this comes with a lot of challenges for organizations. But it's not just the data, it's also the communications, the conversations. How many communication channels do we have today? It's hard to keep track on all this stuff. There's a study at the University of London a few years back that looked at the impact of this constant incoming of communications. And it found that people that are bombarded with emails and text drop their working IQ by around 10 points. which is the equivalent of being stoned or missing a good night's sleep. Now, I'm asking you, do you want to have folks like this in your offices? And I'm probably guilty as charged because Microsoft, we do stuff like email and other things. So we really need to think very hard how we can change that. Another really exciting shift that we see is the move from hierarchies to networks. And that's really permeating across all different areas. 100 years ago, Frederick Winslow Taylor showed up at the workplace with a stopwatch and kind of started the efficiency movement. And in many ways, organizations are still run that way, optimized for efficiency, standardization of process, mechanization, repetition. But we know from our personal lives that networks can be quite powerful, and increasingly that's happening in the workplace. Last year there were about 208 million folks using enterprise social platform services at the workplace, and that number is more than doubling in the next 3 years. So it's happening, and it is happening because the flow of information is a lot faster when you work in a network. You can reach out to people in many different ways. People are more engaged. But it's challenging the hierarchies of today. An interesting case study, my team had a chance to interview General McChrystal, who's now running a consultancy, helping people be more responsive, working more like a network. But when he was in charge of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, he realized very quickly that they were fighting a network. And the US Army is arguably one of the most hierarchical organizations in the world, and it wasn't going well. So what he did was to change their communication process and standards from a need-to-know basis, which is default in Army land, to a need-not-to-know basis, and kind of opening up the communication flow to the edges. And the results was a lot faster information flow. They got a lot of intelligence from the corners of their troops that they didn't expect they would get them. And it really changed the game for them. So it's speeding up communication, it's tapping into people's tacit knowledge, and one of the side effects was also that it increased the trust level, and he talks about creating a shared consciousness amongst those folks. And I think that's a fascinating case study that applies in many other ways to organizations at work. But more interestingly, with networks, we're also seeing a new way of organizing talent and resources. In 2020 in the United States, we'll see about 40% of the workforce coming from contingent staff, free agent, people working maybe through agencies or directly with organizations. These are not low-level burger flippers. Case in point, my team, we're a design-led team. We try to hire the world's best designers. And oftentimes, these folks don't want to be full-time employees at Microsoft, but they want to work with us. So we hire them on a project basis. Folks talk about the Hollywood model of work. It's very project-centric. You make a movie, you hire the talent, and when you're done, people move on to the next project. That is the direction that we're seeing where work is heading. And it really brings a lot of opportunities, but also challenges to the organizations that are not set up to accommodate that kind of fluidity with their resources. And it brings me to my third trend area, and I think it's one that you can teach me more about than I could ever teach you. But for us, it's pretty clear that for the most part, and there are exceptions like Westpac and a lot of the companies in the room here, but for the most part, the workplace is broken. And we see these statistics of 60% vacancy rates. People just don't feel they need to come to work anymore because they can work from anywhere. Now that we all have mobile devices, we're all connected, why even bother going to a workplace, to an office? Well, my team thinks there are actually many, many good reasons to come to an office. And when you look at something like the emerging phenomenon of co-working places, I think you can get some clues why. There was a recent survey that asked folks who work out of co-working places, what is it about these environments that brings you here? And 96% of the respondents said they're looking for communities of innovation. They're looking for like-minded people they can learn stuff from, get inspiration from. We hear a lot about this buzzword of serendipitous discovery. That's the kind of stuff that happen in these spaces. And so for us, it's a very interesting signal that says people value face time, working with other people. Yes, we can accommodate remote collaboration more and more with technology, and I'm going to show you some examples of this. But in the end of the day, being with people in the same room is still the gold standard of communication, collaboration, and creating value. So we see a broader shift that's underway, and we think it's accelerating. And this is really all about a shift from a world that was defined by information scarcity to one that's defined by information abundance. So if you think about, in the olden days, this middle management tier that could control the knowledge, the information, that was power. And you would share that, and you would decide who was allowed to see what. And that's now changing very drastically. So the success formula today is sharing and collaborating, because everything else is going to be too slow. And just to underline that point, when you look at the Fortune 500 companies in 1955, and you compare that list with today's list, any guesses how many names are still on the list in 2014? Out of 500 companies, 61. 89% gone. The average life cycle of a company in 1960 was 65 years. Today it's below 15. So there's something happening here. And yes, you could say, mergers, acquisitions, but it's this old saying, when the pace of change outside your organization is faster than in the inside, you're toast. So how can you be more agile? How can you speed things up? That's what dynamic networks are all about. And that's where the shift from individual productivity to teamwork and communities is underlying that change. Another thing that's really critical in this new environment is this ability to learn and experiment. Design thinking has been around for some time now, and I think that is something that exemplifies this shift, where you really want to understand the problem you want to solve and then quickly iterate on solutions, instead of doing the grand 5-year master plan, having a planning staff that spends months on preparing for a future that is really unpredictable. So I want to be very clear. I'm not here to tell you how the future is going to unfold. We have no idea. But we like to think we have some thoughts on how you can respond in different scenarios. And then the final point I want you to take away is the shift from efficiency to effectiveness of outcomes. We think that is probably the key takeaway in all of this. And let me give you a little story to underline that point. There's a company, a fashion company in Spain called Zara. Some of you may know Zara. And they run their plans at suboptimal 80%. They're not going for 95, 98. It's 80% roughly. And the reason they're doing that is that they want to be able to respond to market trends rapidly. And they can, because they have these systems in place. So they have thousands of retail stores around the world, and they can learn from their staff when there's a certain merchandise that comes back and is not selling. And then they can feed these signals back to headquarters, their design teams, and they can turn around merchandise in less than a month, which is a fraction of what the average fashion companies can do in the industry. And it's working out really well for them. So it's about effectiveness of outcomes much more than efficiency. All right, so I'm transitioning into the introduction for the video. We think there is a new definition of productivity that we'd like to propose, one that's not tied to the industrial model of just creating more with less input, one that's not about efficiency, one that's not about mechanization, repetition, but one that's really centered around people, how people work, achieve their goals. It's about activities. I think Victoria said it really well. It's work is not about where you go, but it's what you do. And for that, we think there's a couple of areas where we can prepare that shift. And this is what the video is really all about. These are the 4 themes that we have kind of distilled over the last couple of years when we did our research. It's about bringing people together so that they can work on bigger challenges across barriers and borders and get things done in new ways. It's about the human attention as a new scarce resource. So we need tools that are smarter, that help us focus on what's important in the moment, that sometimes shield us from all this incoming stuff, that give us information when we need it, rather than us having to look for it. It's about working more naturally, like our mind works, so we can express our creativity in new ways. More and more, the mundane work is going to get automated and done by machines, and what's left is creative work. And I think all you here in the room are doing creative work. So how can we define new tools and environments that support that? And it's about what we call the fluidity of mobile experiences. When I go to my hotel room, wouldn't it be nice if I could immediately connect to this flat screen TV and share my content across devices? Today, there are a lot of barriers in the way to realize these fluid scenarios, but we think that's something the industry needs to focus on. So those are the 4 themes that we care about. And like I said, in Redmond, we have an Envisioning center that allows us to build prototypes that are kind of examples of these principles. And it's been a fascinating journey sharing these prototypes and getting feedback from executives across industries. So we host about 3,000 executives throughout the year who come into our center and have conversations with us about this. But this is only a very small sliver of folks that we would like to engage with, which is why we did this video that also showcases a couple of these scenarios. And I want to quickly introduce the 2 main characters of the video. There's Kat. She is an independent consultant, marine biologist. She's a subject matter expert. She works for universities and schools and sometimes for private enterprise. She's very passionate about her work. She's very social. She needs projects to get some money to pay the rent and whatnot. And Lola is the other main character. She's an executive at a biotech company. She's leading a project to build a new kelp farm in Asia. It's really not about kelp farms, this video, but we just needed a backdrop story. So without further ado, I'm going to run this video and then would love to kind of explain some of the core scenarios and answer some questions that you may have. right. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. That was a fun project to work on. A lot of great locations around the world, including Australia. A lot of stuff went into this video. We worked on this project for about a year. We spent a ton of time working with our internal stakeholders, our leadership team in R&D and design on, what are the key scenarios that we want to showcase here. All the technology that's shown in the video has been invented, is real, has been worked on. It all reflects key investment areas for Microsoft, and if you will, it's our long-term strategy and roadmap. So allow me to break this down a little bit, because I realize when you see it for the first time, there's a lot of stuff happening where you're like, what was that? So I'm going to organize my drill down, if you will, not scene by scene throughout the video, but clustered around the themes that I introduced earlier. Let's start with how people work together, which is really at the core, we think, of a lot of the future of work scenarios that we're investigating. And in the video, there's a couple of key concepts that we're interested in. One we call high empathy presence, and this is this idea of how we can actually share experiences in a very immersive way. And there's a few examples. So the video kicks off with Kat diving, and she's wearing a full facial mask. And this mask is not just your same old diving mask. It's got some magic stuff. She can capture her environment. She can see placed holograms in her worldview that orient her dive. And she can actually share that dive experience. And when the camera opens up, we realize there's a classroom that's with Kat on this dive. And there's a mute girl who's signing, and her signing is being translated in real time, and she's actually having a conversation with Kat about, what is this you're seeing here? So this level of immersiveness is certainly something that's not an interesting scenario and use case for school environments, but we think throughout the workplace. So there's another scene later in the video at home where Kat is checking in with her dad. And she's using a Parallax 3D high-definition display. A lot of words to describe a future display technology that's in the labs today that's more than a 2D view, but it gives you the sensation of, hey, it's a window into the other person's world. And I don't know if you noticed this parallax effect as Lola was walking by. So she can have a conversation with her dad as if he was in the same room with her. And he just came from a 5K run. He has a knee implant. Of course, it's connected to the cloud, sharing the data, and he's doing good. He's showing off a little bit. And then there's this moment at a workplace. So now Lola is appearing on this massive blackboard, which is just an interactive digital display. And she is with the team that's physically located, and she can work on content, digital content with them as if she were there. So you may wonder, how do you do that? It's happening today. We can use capture cameras and sensors that recognize body position, and then basically translate that with software and display it so that it's corrected, if you will. So you can correct eye gaze. So Lola could be sitting at her home using a tablet with all those core components, and that could be translated, and she could be appearing on this wall as if she was right there. So it will be a little while until we have that working in a very mature, reliable way, but those are the kinds of things my team is investigating and prototyping. But there's more to bringing people together. Another thing that we really need to focus on is designing new tools and environments from the ground up for collaboration. So this wall, this digital blackboard here, it can take all kinds of inputs. You can ink on it, you can use gesture, you can talk to it, and people can do this shoulder to shoulder simultaneously. And that's really a big leap from the tools that we have today. We have hardware solutions in market today that kind of get you in this direction, but we know there's more that we need to do to realize these kinds of immersive scenarios. And then you may recall the scene where Kat is in this cafe and she's having this flexible notebook. And what she's looking at there is kind of a digital canvas that allows her to create content. But it's not just her working on it. She has her team in the background, and they can all participate and author stuff together, and then they can post it. And it is, I think, in many ways about getting more contextual services. So when Kat shows up in this coffee shop or this tea place, basically instantaneously there's an app that's been downloaded on her device, and she gets the menu of the place that she's in. She didn't have to find that app or install it herself. It was just there for her, and she can go ahead and order tea. And then later, when she's looking at her feeds, there's the Now feed, which is her personal feed, and then there's one that's more focused on her project work. This feed draws from a bunch of different sources and apps, but it doesn't require her to kind of go in and out of all these apps. It basically just publishes the most relevant stuff. And you may wonder, like, how would that work? We believe there's an interesting opportunity leveraging machine learning technologies to do that. And when you have a system that really understands who you work with, your coworkers, the content you work on, the communications that you have, the meetings, you can create a network diagram and basically have that be your graph and publish relevant content. And again, today we have something that we call Delve, an office graph that's kind of a step in this direction. And it's very powerful. Like when I go to work and I go to my Delve page, it draws from a lot of different sources where content resides that I work on. And some of the stuff is being emailed to me as an attachment. Sometimes it's on some SharePoint site. Sometimes it sits in the cloud. It doesn't matter. I don't have to remember, or maybe it's even on my C drive. It's just all presented to me. What I remember is that an important document I may need to look at for my next meeting. So these are the kinds of intelligent services that we think are going to make our lives a lot easier. And then there's this scene about Kat being with her friends out in this night market, and she's wearing a band, and in the beginning it looks like it's just a fashion band, but ultimately it turns into a very powerful communication tool for her that leverages a version of Cortana of the future, maybe a personal digital assistant that helps her do stuff in the moment. So what was going on in the scene was that Lola, the executive, was basically reaching out to Kat, saying like, hey, we think you're an interesting candidate for the project. And she gets that alert, and then immediately a couple of things happen. There's an invitation for a meeting, but it conflicts with the brunch that she has. So Cortana basically says, hey, what about changing the brunch meeting so you can go to that meeting? Seems a bit more important. And what about reserving some room for you to get some preparation done? And I can also get the transportation to that co-working space for you. And all she had to do was a couple times accept yes, yes. She's still full in control, but it was very easy for her to kind of get to the desired outcome. And Microsoft today is doing things with intelligent agents. Started on the phone, and it's increasingly trickling down into all the platforms. So Windows 10 is going to ship with personal digital assistant for you that learns how you work. And again, you still have the ability to control it, but in the end, I think it will be a very important tool for us to combat that incoming flux of data. And there's an example for this, how we can actually use technology to help us stay focused. When Kat is in the co-working space, she can very easily get all the documents she needs to be productive. And she's wearing this little earbud, which has a bunch of sensors, so it can actually detect her state of flow. And when she is in a flow state, when she's highly productive, we see up in the upper left corner, there's this do not disturb thing that automatically was triggered that basically then suppresses incoming alerts and messages. And that's a big deal because we know from research, when you get out of flow, it takes over 20 minutes to get back in. And that's not a good thing because we get disrupted all the time. And this is here an example where Lola's having a conversation. She's, again, wearing something in her ear to do that. That conversation is being transcribed in real time and projected on that glass wall. But it's not just a transcription of a conversation, it's enriched with additional related content and data. So while she speaks on the fly, there's like other stuff that may help her in that conversation in the moment. So the third theme that we're really interested in, we call friction-free creativity. So in a world where a lot of the mundane tasks are automated and creativity really is it, we want to work more natural. We want to work more like our brain works. And there's a few areas in the video, I think, where this shows up. So for example, again, Lola walking into this little nook in her office, and she just wants to be able to explore something. She's searching for this candidate, and she can very easily transfer that content, that conversation to a wall, just like that. She didn't have to wire a device. Similarly, when Kat is in their co-working space, she can decide how to interact with content, whether she wants to use a keyboard or a stylus. It's on her terms. And we see gesture in combination with touch and voice. So these are the kinds of friction-free environments that we think are really critical in the future. This is in the dive scene, there's a holographic UI projected on the device that Kat is using underwater, so she can actually get a lot more information about how to use this. It's also about working with real-time data. Increasingly, that is what's happening. So here we see how Lola is basically searching for a candidate, and she gets a visualization on the fly. This could be data from LinkedIn or from many other sources, but it's not pre-made content for her. It just gets generated. And here we see a holographic table. We recently announced HoloLens, which is a way for you to work with holograms placed in your view. For that, you still use a headset and glasses. We think in the future there's ways on how to do it without. So there's actually a working prototype of this table right now in the labs. And it really changes the game. So when you can work with content that way, if you can manipulate models, I think it really speeds up the discovery process. This is an example of Kat publishing her post, and she can very quickly post something that looks beautiful as if a designer was involved. But again, she gets services from the cloud. And as she does so, Lola's looking at this, and she can kind of tear into the data. There's a video feed, but she can actually go into the video and see what are the underlying data sources that I'm looking at here. So the final theme is about mobility. And when we talk about mobility today, a lot of people think about this, a smartphone, a device. When we talk about mobility in the future, it's about us being mobile across a set of different environments. And we want to be able to share experiences across those environments. So examples in the videos are walking into a room that could be a dumb display, but once you get recognized, it turns into a smart environment. And you can continue a meeting where you left off, or being able to transfer calls into your environment, and then get a very rich conversation. Going into a co-working space, maybe you have never been there, but very quickly you can authenticate with your device, and you have all the content there that you need. So those are all examples of mobility experiences that I think today, arguably, are kind of hard to come by, but we think that's the opportunity in the future to empower people. So with this, summarizing all these themes, these principles, our team cares about making work more human. We think there's a massive opportunity to move from organizations being focused on efficiency and just getting stuff done faster at scale to one that's really focused on effectiveness of outcomes, focused on empowering teams do their best work with new tools, smarter tools, in more natural ways. So when we talk about the future of work, we think there's a new definition of productivity that we need, and I think that is kind of where we're heading, and that's our vision of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Fantastic opening to WorkTech. We do have some time for some questions. There are roving microphones. If you have a question that you would like to ask, and I'm sure there will be plenty, please just give us your name and the organisation. So do we have anybody raising their hand? Yes, excellent.
It's Bridget from Seek. Sorry, that was loud. Really simple question. What do you see the timing on this stuff coming out?
Oh, here we go. So we typically say 5 to 10 years. I think the reality is some of the scenarios that we show are more closer, maybe like in the 3-year time frame. It's hard to kind of put one number on it because it depends on so many factors. Like I said, the technology often is there, but then it's about business, finding new ways to actually implement those, and ultimately it's about culture and people embracing those new services, tools, environments. But we typically position this video as a 5-year future. And by the way, if you are interested to see it again, it's in the public domain. We just launched it last week. You can go to microsoft.com/productivityvision, and you'll see it right there. Other questions? Yes.
Hi.
Sorry. Ladies first.
Hi. I'm curious to know, when we talk about the Internet of Things, the challenge with it is that the various things don't talk to other things. They only do that across company platforms. Are you looking to share this information with things like Apple and Samsung? Are you participating in creating shared language between all of the things?
That's an excellent question. So, like I said, all the thinking, the ideas behind this is in the public domain, and I'm very happy to sit down with our friends at Apple or Google or Facebook to talk about it. But more importantly, we know that one company alone cannot address something as big as connected environments, the Internet of Things. That's where the industry has to come together. They have to agree on certain standards. There are a lot of big challenges to be solved around security and identity management, and that is something where you need a community to come together. I'm actually slightly encouraged that that is happening. I think we're much more today in an environment where the industry players are recognizing we have to come together to solve these things. And so a few examples just from Microsoft. Over the last couple of years, we've increasingly embraced other platforms. So now you can have Office on Android, on iOS, across devices. And Satya Nadella, our new CEO, is pushing really hard to work across the industry. So whether this is SAP or Salesforce or Oracle or HP, there's more collaboration happening than I've ever seen in the industry, and I've been there for about 20 years now. So I'm encouraged, but I think it will be a long journey. There was a question right there, yeah.
Hi, my name is Paresh. I'm from ISKT. I've got a question around the speed and the impact that internet has with the speed. Firstly, start with, I was impressed with the presentation and Microsoft and the new going technologies in the future.
Thank you.
However, the 1 zettabyte speed, which equivalent to, I think, downloading 1 billion DVDs, so it's really fast. Considering the internet speed going around globally, we're talking globally is like 39 megabits per second, versus in Australia, average internet speed we're looking at is like 9 megabits per second. So going collaboration from office to the home, it requires fast internet speed. Mm-hmm. So I'm more interested in looking at Microsoft vision, which is, now this question may not directly related to Microsoft, but Microsoft is looking at going ahead from 5 to 10 year strategy of rolling out these new technologies. How is the internet sort of evolving with it? Because sort of I'm seeing internet as sort of going hand to hand with the smart technologies.
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not sure if I'm qualified to give you a comprehensive answer on it. So just sharing a few things that I've been aware of. I think on the infrastructure side of the internet, there's a lot of plumbing work that's happening as we speak. It's not very sexy, so you don't read a lot about it, but fiber being laid underwater to have bigger pipes, and over time you will get better download speeds. No promises that we're going to get to hundreds of megabytes a second anytime soon. Then there's a lot of creative, innovative ways underway to enable connectivity on the edges in environments where it's been difficult or not very cost effective to lay fiber. So you may have heard, and that's coming from many other companies Microsoft is supporting but not necessarily driving. And I think ultimately we need to be very smart about how we transfer bits so that if you work at home, you can still have an immersive experience, because what we have today is a tiny little box with a talking head, and that's not really, I don't think that's going to do it, which is why a lot of people just turn it off. So yeah, a lot of challenges ahead, but I think we're on an exponential curve with technology still. It's still going to get a lot faster, and we're going to get there. It's just going to take a little while.